What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Tonight, we're continuing our journey through the 12 steps. This time, we are putting on the lens of looking at the 12 steps and how they help us develop an authentic and real and humility-based self-esteem, as opposed to a pseudo self-esteem that most of us have developed in our lives. And self-esteem, as I've been talking about, is so critical to emotional sobriety. Well, we finished last week. We had extended the discussion of step 8 to include self-hate. And if you haven't listened to that, if you weren't here and you haven't listened to that episode, please tune in and listen to the video. I think it was very, very important what we talked about last time. So tonight is going to kick us off. And the way we do this is there's 4 of us. Herb leads us off in this step, and Herb's going to lead us off in step 9 tonight. Next week, Roger Andes will follow and talk about this step as it relates to self-esteem. Then Tom Rutledge will come in and do his thing, bring you in some of the nutshell wisdom that Tom Rutledge so readily shares with us. And then I will be the cleanup batter, so to speak, and talk about this step as it relates to emotional sobriety. So Herb, good evening. How do we find you tonight?
Good evening, Alan, and everybody who's gathered. What a community, and splendid. I'm blessed and flourishing, so thank you for asking. And I am going to talk about step 9, and I just want to remind people, if they're kind of like, oh gosh, more step work, oh gosh, I'm not an alcoholic. Have as your attitude now, right now, for the entire duration of our time together tonight, certainly, but especially here when I'm going to make some comments, some unpacking of what step 9 is, and a little bit of my personal experience. It's not a workshop. It's not complete. It's going to be some thoughts, and I'm going to try to keep them within the parameters, the border of emotional sobriety and self-esteem. When we'll see. Bill had a wonderful comment, prophetic actually, in the preface to the first edition of the big book, April 1939. Yeah, April 1939. He's 4 years sober, maybe 5 years, and he's writing the big book of the instructions as to how to have a spiritual awakening. And he says in that preface, in the very first paragraph, and besides, our way of living may have its advantages for all. That's why it's so relevant for Dr. Berger to have included in the discussion of emotional sobriety, in the discussion of self-esteem, this step process, which is a methodology that creates a rite of passage from immaturity to maturity, from childhood to adulthood. It's very effective. I won't burden you with my sales pitch. It's very effective. Freedom. And I asked you to have an attitude of openness and open mind and open heart as you're listening to me, and applying it to your own personal life. Whether you have exposure to the big book and the step process or not, it doesn't matter. This is the 9th instruction in a process of awakening. Steps 1 through 9 is the entire program of this process and methodology. Whether you're an alcoholic, whether you're an addict of any kind, or whether you're just, quite frankly, a normal human being who is suffering from the speed bumps of life. That's the equivalent to the unmanageability, what the big book calls a spiritual malady, and what Dr. Berger calls sober suffering. This process is a path to freedom. You want to have a wonderful phrase to have a key to unlock a short description of the purpose and the process of the 12 steps. Think of it like steps going up from one place to another. Interesting, that's a linear description. And my experience now, having navigated this path many times over many decades, is that it's a spiral. We meet ourselves in a deeper, more conscious way. We improve that self in a deeper, broader, more conscious way. We have a better relationship with power or life. I could have just as easily put the word life there. In some of my other material, of course, I put the word God there or higher power. But I'm just keeping it really neutral, I hope, for anyone to embrace this as a human development process. Are we human beings seeking a spiritual experience? Or are we spiritual beings seeking a human experience? Yes. Steps 4 through 7 are to establish a relationship with myself. And now we're looking at the final phase of this program of transformation, this program of awakening, this program of enlightenment, choose your word, this program of change, a radical change and a shift in our consciousness that delivers us from self-centeredness to a reasonable and sane, a healthy other-centeredness, a healthy and effective relationship with the balance of humanity. In step 8, it's merely making a list of the damage that our dysfunctional behavior caused to people and institutions, all people, all institutions. If you're an addict, prior to any exposure to even conscious of being an addict, let alone treating it and getting free of it, from birth to the present moment of your life, have you created any harm? Meaning diminish somebody's life, diminish the quality of their life because you were in it. Well, how do you fix that? Amends is change. Amends is repair. Amends is fixing. But we can't change the past, we know that, but we can change the present. No, we can, and we are responsible to change the present. 100% responsible. Nobody's coming. I'm the one I'm waiting for. First, I need to change whatever it was in me that was creating the chaos in you. I need to change that. What's coming out of me needs to change. And that's a process in itself. The first half of the 9th step, if you will. But the other half, and the more important half, the part I want to really talk about tonight, is how do I repair the damage? Or one of the authors says, how do I balance the scale of justice? Blind justice, standing there like a statue with the scale, and is it in balance or is it on tilt? To balance the scale of justice. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. We're talking about direct amends. I'll also talk a little bit about indirect amends because it's a relevant experience for me, and it's part of the component of walking toward freedom. Except when to do so would injure them or others, and there's a lot of mischief created by rationalization and denial and delusional, dysfunctional evaluation. That's why this step, of all the other steps, this is the only one that absolutely mandates that we have a experienced person guiding us. Whether you call that a sponsor or a step guide or a therapist or a psychiatrist or a human development coach or a lawyer, whatever. We need a person who has knowledge and experience. That's the key here, to guide us. I could not have done this on my own. I was 4 years sober when I thoroughly went through the book with a man who was a big book and step mechanic. And by my standards, even at that time, even today, he was an expert with the big book and the application of these first 9 steps to our personal life. It's a process. Now, I've formulated it. This isn't in the big book. This comes from my own personal experience. I make an appointment with the person. In the process of making the appointment, in those days, 1988, it was only by phone. There was no electronics at that point, other like we have today. I was prepared at the point that I called them and got them, that they, if they said, no, I don't want to see you, I don't want to waste my time, but I am willing to listen to you to make that amends right there. So I described the harm that I did as I see it. But because I'm just in early recovery, 4 years sober, and I know that I don't know, that's an experience I've had over the 4 years of thawing out. I believe the next question is critically important. Is there anything else that I did that you would like to talk about? That's the words I actually use. Is there anything else that created a shadow in your life, that diminished the quality of your life, that you would like to talk about? So many people are very uncomfortable with this process. Whether they're spiritual or not, whether they're in a 12-step program or not, most everybody's is so intimate. It's so direct. It's so confrontational in the best of senses, looking at the truth. And potentially very emotional. Is there any, and that's especially important in family situations. I recommend people meet one-on-one, not with a husband and wife together, or not with a mother and father together, or not with siblings together, but one-on-one. Have the dignity of direct but personal, intimate conversation. I suggest the amends. This is what I'm come up with as a balancing the scale or repairing this damage or something correlated to my assessment of the damage done. And you notice I put the word suggest. I'm not telling them what is the solution, because I need to ask them, is that all right? And is there anything else I need to do to balance the scale? I love the term, and I think people get it from an image standpoint. This completes the process of forgiveness from my standpoint. Look up the word in the dictionary. I was asked to do that at one point later on. Forgiveness, a decision to release them. Look at my hand, a decision to release them. And we know from the Lord's Prayer, forgive them their debt as, forgive me my debt as I forgive them their debt, or the prayer of St. Francis 2,000 years later, to the extent that I release them, I am released. It's a paradox. Quite frankly, I don't need to understand it, but I have observed it. And that's the connection to self-esteem, and that's the connection to emotional sobriety. I go there with the primary purpose. The big book is very clear. If you have any doubt about it, take a look at page, I think it's 77. It says the primary purpose is not me. I'm not here to be healed. I'm not here to be forgiven. I'm not here to feel good. I'm not here to stay sober, although all of that is true. It's a secondary. priority. The primary priority is to allow me to be useful to God and the people around me, to be useful, to be helpful, to be a decent human being, not for my purposes, but to be a healing influence in the community of humanity. And the paradox is, as I mentioned, that I'm healed and that I actually feel pretty good about myself now that, in fact, I'm attempting to clean up the shadows and darkness from the past. And there's more light in my life, and therefore more esteem, and therefore more emotional sobriety. I know now that I can be responsible for my actions, and that if I make a mistake, it doesn't name me. I'm not a mistake. I just make mistakes, and I can correct them. I have agency. I have the ability to acknowledge. The biggest word, I think, in the whole process that I heard back, if not the word, certainly the intention, is people were really glad to have me acknowledge the mischief. I'll be real simple with it. That was especially true of my wife, who had been so gaslighted by me. She had begun to doubt her own sanity. And in the last 6 months of our drinking, 1984, anytime I would approach her, she would stutter in her response. Breaks my heart that I was so intimidating and such a jerk. Many more words for that. Forgiveness is a process, a decision to release them. And as I just mentioned, the freedom that we are released. Willingness is the key to each one of the steps. In fact, in step 2, Bill calls it the cornerstone. But underneath each step and articulated in each step is willingness. That willingness to have an open mind, that willingness to have an open heart, that willingness to take responsibility, that willingness to listen and take direction and take actions that are just very embarrassing. And that's really the point. The point of steps 1 through 9 is the deflation of the ego at depth. Alan mentioned it earlier, this humility that is so necessary. Not humiliation necessarily, although some of us need humiliation, like the 4x4 across the brow of a donkey to make them move or get their attention. I have sponsees like that. But not that humiliation, but the humility that comes from the word humus in Latin, which means earth, dirt, common as, not unique, not special. Humility, that healthy perspective on the truth, a relationship with reality as it actually is. So if you owe money, you pay it back, sometimes with interest. There are people that you cannot see. What about dead people? My father was dead. It was recommended I go to a cemetery, any cemetery would do, and that I sit there and write out the amends process, that 4-part process that I indicated, write it out in a letter after having prayed that his spirit be there. It's all fantasy in some ways. It feels like Disneyland. I mean, it's just not real, and yet I follow direction. And I sat there and I wrote out this letter after I prayed that his spirit be there. And then I read the letter out loud. If you haven't done that, be prepared with a box of Kleenex. I mean, it cracked me open to my core. And then when I asked, is there anything else that I could do? There was a clear sound in me that said, take care of your mother. Well, she had disappeared. For lots of reasons, a story for a different day, and I hadn't seen her in 6 years, so I wrote a letter and I was able to get it delivered to her. Again, a story for a different day, and I had pictures of the kids in there, which she hadn't seen for 6 years. 2 weeks later, I got the envelope back. It had been opened, it had been read. She was still so angry, she returned the pictures of her grandchildren, which she hadn't seen in 6 years. And yet, 2 years later, I got a call. Herbie, you sent me a letter 2 years ago. Is the deal still good? Can you help me? And I brought her home because she had 6 months to live and she wanted to die at home. And we reconciled. How do you get here from there? A volcanic rage toward a father who had been dead 12 years when I got sober. How do you get here from there? A rehabilitated relationship with a woman, your mother, who hasn't seen you or wanted to see you for 6 years and came back and stayed with us and healed until she died. How do you get healed and bring healing into a relationship of a marriage of 25 years where I'd had a history of infidelity, which she knew general things about? Again, a story for another day. And the big book and my step guides specific direction, because he had the same history as I did and the same relationships that I did and the same values that I did. And he said, ask her to pray with you, not for anything other than guidance and healing. Pray for guide. And he said specifically, ask her if she would be willing to get on her knees and hold your hand and look in your eyes and have you pray out loud for guidance and healing. And then the next day, to get on your knees and hold hands and look in each other's eyes and have her pray out loud for guidance and healing. Scariest thing I ever did. Most intimate thing I've ever done. And after a week of that, doing that daily, we were having coffee and she acknowledged that the heat had gone down between us. And we continued that practice for 3 years. And when she died 5 years ago, we were the best of friends, intimate, enjoying one another. The first 5 years of the healing process after that were bumpy. But I got good direction from lots of different people, professional and experiential. And obviously she did too. Step 9 delivers us to the promises of freedom. The bedevilments I talked about in unmanageability, they're on page 52. I'm not going to read them. A good friend of mine created a comparison with the promises on page 83 and 84. And there's a direct correlation. I hope Bill was conscious of it when he created page 52, the bedevilments, that is controlled as if by devils, controlled as if by a puppet on strings. This process cut the strings. This process is a process of exorcism. This process delivered me. I'm hoping you're hearing the term. I didn't do this. Oh, I showed up. I took direction. I took some actions that were really hard, but I was delivered to freedom. I was delivered to an awakening. We suddenly realized that this power is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. I was in bondage of addiction. I was given the grace before I ever came to AA of freedom. 4 years sober, I'm a slow learner and a slow doer. 4 years later, I came to realize that I'm fully responsible for my life and that the only impediment is that I'm holding a bar in front of me that has no roots in reality, and I need to drop the bars, and I will find freedom. That's a prayer that I have in the back pocket, just in case you guys want to pray later on. And the real question I use all along the step process with people, but especially here in step 9, because it's the hardest one and it takes the longest time. There were people that I couldn't find. Back in the day, we didn't have any electronics, so I couldn't find. And there were people I shouldn't find, because there was no point in coming back into their lives after 20 or 30 years. There was no point in it. It wasn't substantive enough that it would have warranted me using their time in that way. And so I created a prayer practice. I believe in prayer, not because it changes God, but because it changes me. It also sort of changes the energy in the world around me. I'm pretty confident about that, but I don't want to go there. And I would determine whether I'm going to pray for this person for 3 days for their healing, guidance and healing, or a week, or a month, or 3 months, that was pretty much and that was my list, so that I had a roadmap. That 8-step is a roadmap. And I knew specifically what to do, when to do it, and when I was done. And I've done that 4 different times over a 20-year period, and I live in freedom and my life flourishes. That's a Reader's Digest version. Thank you.
Wow. Fantastic, Herb. Fantastic. Let me join you here in the spotlight, and let's bring Roger in and
Wow.
Tom Rutledge here tonight, Tom?
I am.
You are here. Great to see
I
you.
just found myself. Yeah.
And we can hear him.
Well, I'm glad you're found.
I once was lost.
And now I'm found. That's a good.
Mhm.
Well, Herb, incredible job as usual in terms of giving us a real kind of perspective on this step and the power of this step. And as you said, it's really an amazing process that we're involved in here. You know, I get remarks all the time from some professionals that are unfamiliar with the program that criticize AA as being a program that encourages us to cop out and not take responsibility and not take responsibility because we have a disease, right? And therefore
Those people have never been to an AA meeting.
It's remarkable to me. I mean, just listening to what you said, and you know, my experience, especially the experience I'm going through at this point in my life, my own crisis now. My God, the level of accountability is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
There's no place to hide anymore.
No.
No place to hide. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, my God, what do we call it? Radical honesty and radical accountability. I mean, is what I'm experiencing, what this is all about. And sometimes, like you said, Herb, I was with you when you were dealing with some of those things, man.
You were one of my lanterns that guided.
I'll tell
me
you,
on the
man,
path.
you know, the courage that you found
Yeah.
and the willingness to confront some of these things was inspiring to me. And, you know, I'm hoping to be able to continue to find that in my life today and find that freedom that comes from such a willingness to really engage and go into those dark places. You know, Tom, something you said to me just a couple of weeks ago when I was really in a dark spot, and I'll never forget this, and I want other people to hear this. You said, Alan, you don't realize it, but you're walking down a corridor that's got a sharp right turn, maybe 100 yards in front of you, maybe a mile. I don't know how long it is, but I know this, that when you get to the end of that, there's a right turn and there's light over there. And that's where I'm standing. That's where Roger is standing. And that's where Herb is standing. He said, just keep walking towards our voice.
Yeah.
We can see the light even when you can't.
That's
Yeah.
Well,
right, man.
and think of Richard Rohr's comment about liminal. You're in the corridor, in between rooms. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, and look at, that's the fellowship. I mean, I wanted to bring this up now because we're not doing this alone, folks. Understand that there's an incredible amount of support available if you open yourself up to it.
Oh,
You
we
know,
cannot
guys,
do this alone. We
I cannot, man. Listen, right now,
nobody.
I would be dead if it wasn't for you guys. I really would. I would not be here any longer. I was in that dark a place. You know that. I told you guys about that. But I just am forever grateful for what you guys have meant to me. So thank you so much.
You bet. It's
Very grateful.
That's the thing I say to people all the time. It's like it's not like this is a suggestion. Nobody can do this alone. Nobody. It's like it's isolation. Isolation is the thing that can kill us in all of this. It can destroy us. You know, none of this shit, my depression, the insanity of the world around me, my alcoholism, none of it can ultimately destroy me if I do not isolate. As long as I remain plugged in and connected to you guys, I can have the worst fucking day of my life. And as long as the people who need to know it, I'm still okay.
Well, and I also know that I cannot be objective when I'm the subject.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
No, it's not possible. It's just not
Yeah.
possible.
Mhm,
And the
mhm.
only way that I can attempt to be closer to reality is I'm looking in the mirror of somebody who is objective.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's it, man. Trust to that point of like, tell me what you see. Tell me what you think. I'll tell people, disqualify. There are times where we just disqualify our own thinking. It's
Right.
like, it's just, we'll get back to it. One day I'll be back. I'll get off the bench, but right now I need to bench myself and I need to listen to what you guys are telling me. And I need to, I mean, I've done to do that in these emotional things. I learned to do that in writing and working with an editor. I was so mean to myself with my should monster, with my writing and ripping myself apart. I learned that specifically I have to disqualify my own opinion about things and listen to somebody else, because we have to, that humility you're talking about, Herb, is the place where we go like, I need to know when not to trust my judgment.
That's
And
a
there are times
spiritual
where
awakening.
it's just, that's right. It's just, sometimes I am the last person I need to trust.
That's right.
And I need to trust you guys. A friend of mine says, turn it over to a lower power. Let me help.
I like that.
Oh,
Turn it
that-
over to
I
a
love
low.
that. That's right.
God, good thing you
Yeah,
didn't tell me
that's
that
so
before. I
good.
wouldn't have called you. Jesus Christ.
So Herb, I just want to echo, particularly impactful tonight, particularly articulate tonight, particularly personal and moving for me tonight. Just a really deep thank you to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're real welcome, man. All the way across the board, and very insightful as always. So, as you guys know, I've been harping on a couple of missing pieces from Nathaniel Brandon's to take it back to self-esteem work. From my point of view at this point in my life, the first is the humility piece, which we've given a great deal of attention to. And as I say, that's not a language that Brandon talks about, at least not directly. I've talked about how he brings it in indirectly. And then the other big piece is that, to me, is a huge missing piece, is what we are talking about right now: relationship, relatedness. It's not that he doesn't speak to it, he does, but not very much, okay, compared to the focus on self-esteem, self-confidence, self-respect, self-assertiveness, self-responsibility. And again, I'm not wanting to take anything away from what he says about all of those areas. They're incredibly important, including willingness, but not nearly enough attention to the appropriate place, not one of excessive or unhealthy emotional dependency, but the appropriateness of connection and the incredible importance of connection to other individuals and to community, right? To a sense of other people as a group. So you guys have all given great testimony tonight at a very personal level to the critical importance of that. We are not meant to be islands unto ourselves, even though many of us do try to cope as best we can by adopting that position, more or less. We all have fears about connecting too deeply. I believe we all have fears about the vulnerability that comes with that, and the possibility for new pain, the possibility for being left. I was reading a therapist the other day who said, life by itself will bring pain. There's no way to avoid the pain of life. But then he said, our task is to bring joy as well. And I would substitute the word freedom for that as well, Herb, in the way that you're talking about it. I've spent a lot of time isolated because of illnesses I've had and problems since COVID. hit us. Been inside this apartment in West Los Angeles for a lot of days and nights. And honestly, there's a part of me that's introverted enough and introspective enough. Frankly, I haven't minded it a lot of the time, but I've stayed in touch, usually through FaceTime or through texting or through emails and stuff. Even when I haven't been seeing a lot of people in person, I've stayed in touch with the people who are most important to me in my life. And that's been a lifeblood for me. And that includes you guys and this meeting, you know. So I appreciate like heck the opportunity to be here, and can't echo loudly enough your comments about the importance of other people and the importance of relationship to other people. So that's what I want to say tonight.
It's a lifeline. Yeah. I just want to add a couple pieces with that. One is I want to say, so that everybody, because I think we all need to be reminded of this frequently, because as human beings, we are forgetting machines, and we don't need better memories. We need lots of reminders, and we need to be each other's Post-it notes. And I can say what I've said tonight about the importance of not isolating, and I can be isolating like nobody's business by tomorrow, or by later tonight. It's like, that's the part of it too. It's like, so I say that out loud to celebrate that, to hopefully share that, but also to remind myself of that, because well, shit. I wasn't going to say anything about this, but since we're in this right in the middle of this, I'll just say, because I need to not be sure I'm not doing that either, because I'm going through a medical evaluation right now where the way I put it to a friend of mine, they're trying to pin a diagnosis of cancer on me, and I'm fighting it at every I'm trying to get a lawyer to get me out of that, but it's like. It's like, but they're not sure what brand, and so but I am dealing with that stuff, and I have told some people, but I had thought I had not decided whether to say that here in this group tonight, but with this conversation, it feels right to just say that, and just I'm good, I'm doing okay, I'm supported, and just appreciate anybody's good wishes and prayers, you know, as we go along.
Thank you, Tom.
Zoom is a wonderful connection. But I had the delusion that since I'm on Zoom with a large community almost on a daily basis, that I'm in connection. And then I got a little wonky. Yeah. So, you know, Tom, prayers, of course, but there's nothing more therapeutic than reality, as you know.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I love your term of the use. It's not linear. It's not step by step. It's a spiral. I love that. And to me, it's not just a metaphor. It's a very apt description of how our process works. It's not totally dissimilar from the idea that we are all analogous to an onion, and we reach a level of our experience and our pain and our fear and our anger and our capacity for connection, and we think we're done, right? And then we open up a little bit more, or we experience a crisis, which is often what it is. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, all of this stuff is right back in my face again. And that's that is a metaphor that I use. But God, do I experience life? And what brought it up, Tom, is what you just said. It's like, it never pays for me to get overconfident about what I'm going to remember and where I'm not going to step, where I'm not going to step back, because it's surefire that I'm going to step back sometime soon, right? Or feel like life is knocking me back, or both. So I just wanted to mention those two pieces. I love that spiral metaphor. It's not a linear path, and it pays to be really humble about where I may be tomorrow, right? Or later tonight. Yeah.
Well, and vulnerability is strength. I mean, it's the opposite of what we've grown up with, or what I was programmed with, which was vulnerability is weakness. And it's like that's one of the things that that I love about it. And I don't think in 12 steps or in recovery movements like this that we have a corner on the market, but I think we have a very strong position with this, which is, you know, like I was running into somebody the other day that was saying, I was going into a medical place where somebody was saying, well, I'm trying to keep people's confidence, because there were some people I might know and they might know me. And one of the things I told this woman, I said, I'm an alcoholic. I said, we just tell everybody everything that's fucking going on with us. So it's like protect everybody else's anonymity. But it's like, I don't care who knows I'm here. It's like, it's okay. You know, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here and happy to share with anybody who wants to share. Yeah. It's free. That's freedom too. I love that, where I don't feel there's so many things I don't have to hide anymore that I used to have to keep to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Herb. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring Tom Potash back into the. Tom, you want to throw your 50 cents into this pot here?
Yeah, maybe it's 35 cents. Herb, what stood out to me was when you said, how do you get from here to here, right? And I know the mechanism, right, that gets us from here to here, like that's the step work and that, but just like we're talking tonight and everyone's, you know, honesty and vulnerability, it's not just the mechanism, it's the energy that goes into it and the freedom that comes out of it. That's shit. It's multitudes of relief and expression of love and love received that happens as a result. You know, the healing that happens, you know, the mechanism is one thing, but it's the results which are prodigious. It's just amazing.
Outcomes that are disproportionate to my input.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
It's like it's a magnifier,
Amen.
multiplier.
Right, and that's the word. And I sometimes use the word it's a geometrical relationship. It's you can't get here from there, but here we are, and there's an explanation, and or at least an observation. Thank you.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. You know, the first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. You know, we're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.